The past came like a punch to the gut. Richard felt a lump in his throat as he tried to process what he was seeing. That woman on the floor, dirty, frail, holding two small children. It was Isabella. The Isabella that had once been his world. The Isabella he had abandoned. Time had not been kind to her. Her face, once full of life, was now marked by deep lines of suffering. Her eyes, which had once sparkled with joy and hope, were now dark, empty. But Richard couldn't just ignore it. He needed to know. He needed to understand. He took a hesitant step forward, his heart hammering in his chest. Isabella's eyes slowly rose to his. First, confusion. Then, painful recognition. For a second, he thought she would say something. But instead, she looked away, as if he were nothing more than a stranger. As if he wasn't someone she had once loved. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. Part of him wanted to run away, to pretend he'd never seen her. But something stronger held him back. He knelt down beside her, ignoring the gaze of the people around him. Isabella? The name came out of his mouth almost in a whisper. She didn't answer immediately. His arms wrapped around the two children like a protective shield. He looked at the little ones, a boy and a girl. They were thin, their clothes dirty and worn. The boy looked about 6, the girl maybe 5. And then, like a bolt of lightning cutting through the night, the truth hit him. He saw something in them, something familiar. In the girl's eyes, the same deep shade of brown he saw in the mirror every morning. His children. The ground seemed to disappear beneath his feet. His mind spun. His chest burned. But before he could say anything, Isabella finally opened her mouth. "What do you want?" Her voice was cold, cutting, emotionless, as if he were just another rich man looking at a destitute woman with pity. But Richard didn't feel pity. He felt something much worse. "What happened to you?" he asked, almost voiceless. She laughed, a bitter laugh without a hint of happiness. "What happened? When you left me, I found out I was pregnant. But you'd already gone, and I didn't have the courage to look for you. I tried, Richard. I tried everything. I worked 2 jobs. I did what I could. But the world isn't kind to single mothers. I lost my job. I lost my house. And in the end, all I had left was this." She gestured around, as if to show the only thing that fate had left for her, the street. Richard felt a pang in his chest. The air felt heavy. He remembered the day he left. The day he put his dreams and ambitions above everything else. He thought he was making the right decision. That love didn't pay the bills. That success was more important than any feeling. But now, looking at Isabella and those children, the truth was clear. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. Everything he had built, the business empire, the fortune, the luxuries, suddenly seemed insignificant in the face of the cruel reality that Isabella and her children were facing. His children. It still echoed in his mind like thunder. He couldn't believe that he had walked through life believing he was on top of the world, while his blood starved in the streets. His gaze fixed on the boy, who held the hem of his mother's garment tightly, suspicious. He didn't know who Richard was. He had no idea that the man standing there, well-dressed, smelling of expensive perfume, and wearing a watch worth more than an apartment, was his father. Richard swallowed. He didn't know what to say. How to explain? How could he justify years of absence, abandonment, and silence? But before he could think of anything, Isabella stood up abruptly, taking the children by the hand. "I don't need your pity," she said, her voice laced with resentment. "I've been through worse." Richard felt despair take over. He couldn't just let them go. Not after seeing the truth. "Isabella, please." His voice wavered. "Let me help." She laughed again, that bitter laugh that cut like a blade. "Help? How would you help, Richard?" "By throwing a handful of money and disappearing again." Her words were a direct punch to his ego. But this time, he wasn't going to run away. I made a mistake. I made a mistake that I don't even know how to fix. But let me try. Let me get to know them. Let me." He hesitated. He didn't know if he had the right to call those children his children after so long. Isabella clasped his small hands in hers. For a moment, Richard saw the internal battle in her eyes. She wanted to believe. She wanted to accept help. But what if it was another disappointment? Another empty promise? Richard realized Isabella didn't trust him. And she had reason to. That's when he understood words wouldn't be enough. He needed to prove it. Show with actions that he wasn't going to disappear again. Show that he was there to stay. But how? How could he undo years of pain? How could he rescue Isabella and the children from this nightmare without looking like he was just trying to assuage his own guilt? It was there that he had to make the most important decision of his life. And he knew exactly what he had to do. Richard knew that words weren't enough. He needed to prove that he was there to stay. So without hesitation, he took off his expensive coat, folded up his shirt sleeves, and knelt down in front of Isabella and the children, in the middle of the dirty, cold sidewalk. The gesture made Isabella step back, confused, but Richard looked straight into her eyes. "I'm not leaving. Not this time." With a quick movement, he picked up his cell phone and made a call. Within minutes, a black luxury car pulled up next to them. The driver got out, but Richard held up his hand. "Not for me. For them." Isabella's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Richard pointed to the car. "You and the children are going to a hotel now. A warm place with food, with a hot bath. And tomorrow we'll talk. Not about the past. About the future." Isabella hesitated. She wanted to trust, wanted to believe that this wasn't just another empty promise. But her children's pale faces, shivering with cold, spoke louder. Swallowing her pride, she held her eldest son's hand and got into the car. Richard watched the vehicle disappear down the avenue and felt a wave of emotions he had never experienced before. He didn't just want to right a wrong. He wanted to be there, to be a father, to be a better man. That night, he didn't sleep. He spent hours going back over his memories, facing up to his shortcomings, accepting that he had wasted years of his life focusing only on business, money, status, and all that seemed insignificant now. The next day, when Isabella and the children woke up in their hotel room, there was something waiting for them. New clothes, toys for the children, a hot breakfast, and a letter. In it, Richard didn't apologize. He didn't use empty words. He only promised one thing. From this day on, we will never be apart again. The door opened, and for the first time, he saw Isabella cry in a different way. It wasn't pain. It wasn't anger. It was hope. And at that moment, Richard knew his life would never be the same again. The next few days were a test. Not just for Richard, but for Isabella and the children. The mistrust was still there. The wounds of the past don't heal overnight. But Richard didn't back down. He was there for every little moment, the children's first decent meal in months, the look on Isabella's face when she realized he was really trying, her eldest son's shy laugh when he got a toy car. Richard understood that money couldn't buy lost time, but it could provide a new start. He rented an apartment for Isabella and the children, close to his own. He didn't impose anything. He just made it clear that he wanted to be there, available. He took the children to medical appointments, put them in school, learned about their personalities, their tastes, their fears. For the first time, he found himself swapping business meetings for afternoons in the park, signing contracts that were less important than the drawings scribbled on the kitchen table. And then, one day, something happened. His youngest son tugged at the hem of his shirt and, with the innocence of someone who doesn't yet understand the complexity of the world, looked at him and said, "Daddy, will you come and play with me?" Richard froze. For a second, he felt the weight of it all. All the mistakes, all the wrong choices. But at that moment, he knew he was on the right track. He smiled, knelt down and answered, "Of course." Just for those of you who like a good story and have watched to the end, Leave your comment below from which city you're watching, and I'll leave a heart in your comment. Bye, and see you in the next video.